Card design has changed a lot over the years. One of the biggest changes was a shift from instants and sorceries being powerful to creatures being powerful. If you look at how bad creatures used to be, it's almost laughable. Just look at Coal Golem or Jacques Levert, completely useless cards by today's standard. But today, creatures have occupied a completely different space. Not only are they far more powerful, but they also do much more than ever before. This change in design space is interesting, and I wanted to talk about it in today's video, because it feels like everything these days is a sorcery, and sorceries are obsolete. But first, one additional piece of gear you could use is the Manta Sleep Mask. This video is sponsored by Manta Sleep. They make high quality, comfy, cozy sleep masks, and I actually used these not too long ago when I was on a long flight. They are very well made, and I love the eye cushions, which make these so much more comfortable than the crummy ones I got on the plane. And actually, peeling back the curtain real fast, I appreciate that Manta just gave these to me to try out before committing to any ad. I could have taken the product and bailed, but they wanted me to actually like it before doing an ad. I really appreciate that. And a lot of other companies would not be that confident in their product. But their confidence is well founded because these do hold up, and the Manta Sleep sound masks with built-in headphones are really awesome. I can't sleep with headphones on or earbuds since I'm a side sleeper, making these perfect for me to listen to when I'm falling asleep. They also have other great sleep products like this white noise machine if that helps you snooze. Using my discount code TTM or direct link in the description will get you 5% off, and it supports the channel. Thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring the video. There are tons of powerful sorceries. Tutors, overrun effects, card draw, clone effects, removal, and more. I'm sure there are some amount of sorceries in your decks. But when was the last time a really powerful sorcery was printed? There are some fun ones like Mirror Form, but when you compare it to the average creatures we get from more recent sets, I don't think the power level is quite the same. Not only that, all of those sorceries I showed earlier have creature equivalents. Cards that are basically sorceries. We now have creatures that enter the battlefield and provide a full sorcery's worth of effect with a body instantly. And many of these can be more powerful than the sorcery counterpart because of the creature typing. Of course, there are cards that can synergize with sorceries, but there are also plenty of synergies that work with creatures. Additionally, since the creatures stick around, many of these can reuse the sorcery aspect of them with a blink spell, or they just have stats. Turns out if your Thoughtcast comes with a 2/2 flying blocker, that is pretty useful. And with Flash, some of these creatures are practically instants as well, making them even better than some sorcery effects. This added utility makes many of these creatures stronger than their instant or sorcery counterpart. For example, Regrowth is a very good utility card, but for 1 mana more, you can have an Eternal Witness. Technically a worse rate for this effect, unless you can blink it, skull clamp it, reanimate it, care about the creature types, put counters on it, or if you can just make use of the Eternal Witness as a blocker. The number of creatures with an ETB effect has gone up quite a bit over time. Let's look at a few examples. If we go back to core set M15, 31 of the 137 creatures had an enter the battlefield effect. And I've eliminated ones that trigger when other things enter. We're just looking at cards that are functionally sorceries, where they come into play, do an effect immediately. So that is 23% of total creatures in M15. Fast forward to a modern core set in Foundations, there were 95 out of 290 creatures with ETB sorcery style effects. So 33% of creatures are like this. In original Theros, 23 out of the 138 creatures had ETB effects, so 17%. And later in the Theros Beyond Death, there were 50 out of the 111, so a increase to 45% of creatures had enters effects. ETB creatures now take up a much larger portion of total creatures in sets these days. Creatures are not the only thing getting that sorcery treatment though. Let's look at the history of vehicles. When vehicles first came out in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt, only one vehicle had an enters the battlefield effect. Most vehicles were there for stats, attack triggers, or other utility. And for a while, that's what vehicles were. Utility cards that you would crew and attack with. They had keywords, attack triggers, and actually animating them with other cards to skip the crew cost was a useful thing to do. And then we came to Kaldheim, where we got Esika's Chariot, which is a very different card. It has an enters effect and crews itself. And then fast forward to Aether Drift, and we have tons of enter the battlefield effects. These vehicles don't need to be crewed or attacked to get value. They're just sorceries, and sometimes you crew it if you got nothing else going on. A large portion of these aren't even useful to animate. I mean, what's the point of a vehicle that you don't want to crew? It really is just a sorcery at that point. Enchantments are also getting the same treatment. In Tarkir Dragonstorm, we got multiple enchantments that have a sorcery-like effect and then also stick around for static value later. We have seen more and more of this effect on enchantments that are basically sorceries which then stick around and repeatedly get value later. Interestingly enough, we don't see the opposite. We have Flame Tongue Kavu, but we don't have Kavu's Fire Breath, which is a sorcery that makes a Kavu token. Of course, this wouldn't be as powerful since you can't blink the token and loop the ETB, but it still feels odd that this power creep has only gone one direction. And this leads me to ask the question, what's the point of a sorcery? Creatures have the unique design space of triggering when they deal combat damage, or on upkeep, end step, leaving the battlefield, and more. Enchantments can also stick around and trigger repeatedly at a specific step, or when they leave the battlefield. So then, what does a sorcery actually do? It can't stick around in the same way and trigger repeatedly. That's something that only permanents can do. Well, I guess there's these which kinda do that, but not really an effect we commonly see. And then what effects are actually restricted to being only on sorceries? I think the answer is nothing. It appears creatures can do almost anything when they enter. Even something like a board wipe, you actually have creatures that are pretty close to doing that. Now, I guess this has technically always been the case. You can find old creatures from Magic's past that do wacky effects when they enter, but now it is more relevant due to power creep. As removal has gotten better, it's caused creatures that have to attack or deal damage for their effects to become much weaker. Imagine if Dockside Extortionist needed to deal damage to get its effect. It would play a lot more like Ancient Copper Dragon, a powerful card in the right shell, but still perfectly susceptible to removal. Though I do think at 2 mana, this would still be very powerful, but that's besides the point. Those creatures that need to attack, or even worse, deal damage to trigger, are much slower. I mean, can you think of any boast creatures that are good? I guess there's the one that tutors? Did you even know Burgi can double boast for a turn? We get more and more of these creatures that have the ability to do something immediately, so even if they get instantly disintegrated by some spot removal, you still got value. So what does this mean for Magic? Well, there's 3 big factors. 1, it means games are faster. Removal doesn't slow down the value you get from a creature as much. Cards having more immediate impact instead of incremental value will just speed up a game. 2, it means counterspells are much better. Back in the day, a Doomblade and Essence Scatter were about equivalent in terms of stopping creatures. But now, since Doomblade does not stop the powerful trigger from a creature's enters effect, it's much weaker than the counterspell. 3, creatures without enters effects need to be very strong to compete. If your creature needs to attack or trigger on upkeep to function, it has to be very good, otherwise your creature will be sorely outclassed by something else that gets the effect immediately. This is how cards like Beevuu or Badger Mole Cub can still see play. If you untap with them, the game might just be over. As this power creep gets worse, that becomes the bar a creature has to clear if it's not going to enter the battlefield and cause immediate impact. Please note this is power creep, not power sprint. We are not at a point currently where there are no creatures without enters effects that are viable in any format. But rather, this is where we are heading, and this is a design decision that is being made consciously by Wizards. So can this be fixed? Well, kinda. Of course, Wizards can always print whatever they want and shape the game however they wish. And if they choose to use Standard as an actual safety valve for power creep, they can slow down the game. Things can always change. But this is a fairly difficult thing to culturally change. Right now, Wizards has really leaned into the philosophy that more is better. More cards, more damage, more speed. Instead of improving counterplay and reactionary things, you are meant to go over the top of your opponents and win faster. Part of this is because EDH has taken over design, and as a casual format, there is this idea that everybody does something and then someone wins randomly. And that preventing this is antithetical to casual Commander. Not that I agree, but this is a sentiment a lot of players have. This is why we haven't seen an equivalent rise in Torpor Orb style effects, which I understand isn't a great solution. Unless they're one-sided, it's hard to fit one of these effects into your deck, since you probably have ETB effects that you want to use. Instead, I hope they tone down power creep and maybe strengthen protection spells. Give them the ability to more easily dodge spot removal and counter magic. Then you can print more creatures with incremental advantage. This way players can then commit resources to that creature, allowing it to slowly chip in for damage and get value turn after turn. I think something like the Ancient Dragons are good examples of this. This is how creature design could look going forward. Powerful combat damage triggers, strong enough that it is worth expending an extra resource to protect them or give them haste such that you can actually connect with the effect. Not only does this slow down games and create more of a back and forth gameplay, but then sorceries can regain their relevance as being the fast effect, a one and done instantaneous special effect, and creatures will instead have to be a bit slower, but retain the benefit of being something that can give you value turn after turn. And same with enchantments and vehicles and so on and so forth. Until then, let me leave you with a few card suggestions to try out in your deck building, specifically for EDH. I have to shout out Withering Boon. Seems weird to play a creature only counterspell in black, since you can already destroy creatures easily, but being able to stop a powerful ETB, especially in mono black, is massive. Every set this card seems to get better and better. Another suggestion is to pack more enchantment and artifact removal. If enchantments and artifacts are going to be more prevalent because they have sorcery effects taped onto them, you might need more answers to answer these more powerful effects. Artifact and especially enchantment removal are often overlooked categories when it comes to EDH deck building, so I would implore you to make sure you have a decent amount in your list. Power creep has had a lot of different effects on Magic, and one effect power creep has is the devaluing of sorceries and instants in the case of cards with flash. I would love to see a more balanced approach to this. I don't think we need to go back to the old days of horrendous creatures, but maybe a more even split between the power of creatures and instants and sorceries. As we get more and more sets printed every year, and thus more creatures, I would love to see more cards focused on incremental value, resource engines that you can commit more to protecting. This creates a lot more suspense and anticipation when you have multiple turns to find an answer to a threat, and then see if they have the right protection, rather than lose instantly since you didn't have exactly a counterspell right then and there. Hotalidge asks, who's your favorite MTG content creator and who's one you'd like to collab with? I refuse to answer the first part because if I pick a favorite, it's kind of mean to the not favorites, right? How can I have a favorite? In terms of collabing, I would love to do something more with Attack on Cardboard. I have an idea that I've been meaning to work with him on that I've just put on the back burner for a long time. If you're watching this, Attack on Cardboard, apologies. I'll get around to working on that right after the next big project I do. Special thanks for watching. If you want to ask questions like that or be in the credits like this, check out the Patreon link below.